Matters with James and Jessica Carter is simply our way of inviting people into our lives.
What's up, guys?
Welcome back to Heart Matters with James and Jessica Carter. Today we're talking about communication. Communication is a lifeline of any relationship, not just a marriage. However, we're only going to highlight communicating within your marriage. One of the most important things to know when it comes to communication is that men and women communicate totally different.
Totally different.
Have you ever heard the saying, women are from Venus? Is it women are from Venus and men are from Mars? Yeah, see, that saying, like we're from two totally different planets.
It's true.
When it comes to communication. And that's the very first thing that you have to understand when you begin to sit down to talk with your spouse, is that their language may not necessarily be your language, and sometimes you're both really saying the same thing. It's just because you're speaking two different languages and you haven't quite allowed yourself to understand his or her language. You feel like it's becoming a fight, and really it's not a fight. You guys are actually agreeing, but you can't even see that you're agreeing.
At least 99%. Well, I guess I should say 99. 95% of the time, the guy is going to be the one that lacks.
I don't think his statistics are really on point, but we're just going to go out there with that.
Exactly, they're not, but I'm just saying, like, most of the time, the guys are going to be the ones that do not want to communicate. I know with us in our relationship, I was that guy. Like, I was not a communicator. I did not want, but you know what I thought about? It just hit me. I communicated. In order to, when we were coding and stuff, like I said, we'd be on the phone, talking and all. So I was communicating then, but the moment we get married, and this happens a lot in marriage, the moment you get married, now you're like, that woman want to talk all the time, and she just want, every time I come on, all she want to do is talk. You missing the point. Y'all was talking before when you was coding. You was trying to figure her out and learn, who she is and what she like. So you had to ask those questions then, but you forget that once you get in, and I did the same thing. We got into marriage, and I totally was not a communicator. I said to myself I wasn't a communicator. So we would be up to, midnight or late. I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to work. She'd come and beat me up with pillows. And, we're going to talk about this. I'm like, please just.
He make me sound so violent on these videos for some reason. I need to do a self-examination.
You beat me up a little bit, but she always said I can take it. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could,
But you know what's funny, though? Listening to him talk, and something I've never even really considered before until this very moment, is, him talking about how he would act and not really want to say things. Whether he realized it or not, or I realized it or not, and as you can see, we didn't realize it. Even that was communicating. It was just his way of communicating. It was his way of saying, I don't want to talk about this right now. But because I was so focused on how I communicate, and I felt like, oh no, we got to talk this thing through, and that's how you communicate, I was missing his form of communication. And sometimes that's what we do. We miss the other person's form of communication because we're so caught up in what communication is to us. And communication is not just necessarily dialogue. We have to think about nonverbal communication. Sometimes the look on his face or the look on her face says, we probably don't want to talk about this right now. Give it a minute. Let me cool off so we can come together when both of our heads are in level space, and we can talk about it and not say anything that's going to try to hurt the other person. And now we can clearly articulate what's really going on within us. So we have to be aware of the communication that's happening that's not necessarily verbal.
And one last thing before we shut it down, because we can't hold you guys' time for too long. But one last thing is, what we talked about in one of the other videos is about separation. You got to be careful with separations. You cannot say that, and we do this all the time, and even in communication, you kind of single yourself out, thinking that it's you against the world. When you start doing stuff like that, that automatically shuts you off from your spouse, your significant other. When you do stuff like that, communication is always going to be hard. When you start thinking that, why is she telling me this? And I already know I'm going to do that. I'm not going to buy you flowers if you're telling me to buy you flowers. It's like you're telling me to do this and to do that. And so now that communication is totally gone. You're not going to communicate, because in your mind, it's almost like you're living as a single man or a single woman. You got to be careful with that. You have to do everything together. When she says that, it's not that she's saying it against you. She's just trying to help you communicate with her, trying to bridge that gap that you guys are trying to push,
Yeah, very important that you don't alienate your spouse. Like he said, no man is an island. Don't try to get out there and say it's just me against the world, because the more you say that, the more alone you will become. And eventually, for the person who wanted to communicate eventually they're going to lose their interest in communicating. And now not eventually again, for the person who wanted to communicate in the first place, they will get to a point where they no longer want to communicate, and now you really are an island. You're out there alone, and you're looking for that person, but they're no longer there because you pushed them away due to lack of communication.
So that's it. That wraps it up for this particular segment. So thank you guys for listening, and hopefully you guys are getting better and better in your relationship. See you next time.